All right, y'all. Welcome back to another episode of Human on the Daily. I am so excited to have the one and only Tracy O'Malley on today. I connect. When did we connect? It's been a couple years, technically, the first time, but then I think the first time we really actually spoke was in Ohio, maybe. Like
Yeah.
really in the Uber on the way to an event. And I've always loved your energy. It wasn't the first time I've seen you speak, but it was yeah, I love your story so much, and so I'm really excited to bring it to my listeners, and I think you're such an example, great example of once you learn more about yourself, like with you, I know you're really big on the Enneagram, you're the Enneagram queen,
Mhm.
and utilizing knowing yourself and your self-worth as a way to break out of the expectations of others and really lean into who you truly are as a superpower. So I would love for you to just kind of roll with that, like intro yourself and how you got to where you are today.
My goodness, thank you for having me on first and foremost. I
Yeah.
think this is the number one thing that keeps us stuck and not moving forward. We live in a day and age where information is like immediate at our fingertips on social
Mhm.
media. Like we know all the things. We have all the strategy for free on the internet.
Yeah.
And yet, so many of us, myself included, find ourselves stuck. And then what comes when we know better, but we're not doing better? Shame,
Mm.
avoidance, numbing, comparison, all the things that keep that cycle going. And I'm no different, honestly. And, where I came into the Enneagram was kind of at this breaking point in my life. This was 12 years ago. And I've been in personal development for 22 years. So for the
Mhm.
first 10 years of my personal development journey, I felt like I was, like many of you, taking 4 steps forward, 5 back, 4 forward, 5 back. And
Mhm.
my goodness, was that frustrating. And honestly, it felt a lot easier to be oblivious and ignorant to it, quite honestly. But
Yeah.
with great reward comes great responsibility. And to whom much is given, much is required. And I knew I wanted something different, and that was going to require something different of me, in which I didn't have the modeling or the path put in front of me. I had the path of strategy, but I didn't have the path of self awareness. And no matter how many therapists I hired and how many coaches I could put in front of me, I felt like I didn't even understand myself. And so I would chameleon myself into whomever was in front of me in efforts to have them be able to guide me out of this stuckness. And the cool part is we have everything inside of us to be able to do that for ourselves. Now, it's better, like even the best, most self-aware people have coaches and mentors, and that's really important. But it's really hard to lead yourself if you don't know who you are,
Yeah.
what motivates you. And that's kind of where it brought me 12 years ago. Is I had all the resources, the tools, the therapists, the coaches, and I wasn't doing something different with it because I was doing it in ways that maybe weren't authentic to who I was. And when I met myself with the shame and the anger and the frustration, it kept setting me back. And so I was at this point where, like, I need to do something different, and let's burn all the boats and try this for a change. And that's kind of where the Enneagram came into my life. And I came into it kicking and screaming. I wanted nothing to do with it.
I feel like that's the case with anything that's like really going to be
Yeah.
the thing that makes a difference. We fight it.
Yeah, we really, really do. It's, we want something different and we know it requires something different, but then we put all these um contingencies on it, right? It's like, but not
Mhm.
that. It's like we're getting dealt this hand, but we've got like this own deck of cards in our back pocket. It's like, no, you keep your cards to yourself. I'm going to play my own hand here. And life's not getting shorter, and we only get one of them. And so I finally got to that that place of humility and frustration, and starting to see my own children repeat. If you don't repair
Mm.
if you don't repair it, you repeat it, or it gets repeated,
Yeah.
or both. And that was happening in my life. It's like the people that I'm here to love and lead are going to do what I do, not what I say to do. And so
Yeah.
that required more of me. And so when I was introduced to the Enneagram, I was actually at probably one of the hardest points in my life, coming out of a divorce, the recession, a business that I had to shut down, dysfunctional and disordered relationships with food, alcohol, anger, codependency, you name it. I was kind of at this breaking point of like, I need more. And my therapist suggested the Enneagram, and I told her to go fuck herself. I was like, I don't need a label. I'm coming
Mm-hmm.
to you in rehab with lots of labels. I don't need another.
Yeah.
Thanks. Just tell me how to fix all this shit. And she is wired like me and wasn't even rattled because I was a little bit spicier than even my colorful language here. And she wasn't even rattled by it. And she was like, my dear, your best thinking has gotten you here. And this actually might help you get out of the box that not only the world has put you in, but you have also put yourself in. So how about you open up your mind a little bit to this? And I was like, well, shit. First of all, she wasn't even remotely afraid of me, which is usually how I would use that spiciness, is to kind of test people.
Yeah.
And she had a fucking point. And so I surrendered, which is not easy for this girl to do. I surrendered and I trusted her. And that's where the journey with the Enneagram began. And pretty rapidly, immediately, I had this holy shit moment, like, wow, this is the roadmap out of the conditioning and the expectations that I had been living with for 40 years at that point, and meeting myself with compassion in order to break free of that. And once I started to break free of that for myself, then I had to deal with the wreckage and the conditioning and expectations of those in my life. And that was a whole different ballgame. But the Enneagram also helped me deal with that. So it was like, first of all, helping me compassionately deal with the expectations I had put on myself for 4 decades, but then also breaking free of the conditioning and the dance I'd been dancing for 40 years as well, with the people that were in my life, some by family, some by choice. And that was a tough road for sure. And I think that's where most of us get stuck.
Yeah. And I definitely want to dive into that a little bit more, because whether it's examples from yourself or other examples, because I know you've worked with tons of people, myself included, like I've done a one-on-one with you, and really diving into like how you can utilize this tool and how it shapes every aspect of your life. Like you were saying, like it's not only just breaking out of the expectations and knowing yourself, but it's how you even recognize and then address the expectations that have been put on you by other people. So do you mind diving into that a little bit more?
Yeah. Well, here's the thing with the Enneagram. It's a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful tool. And it's next to my faith, my number one tool that I use for everything in my life. That being said, having the right information is going to be key. Because think of it like a GPS system or a roadmap. Like if you don't have the right coordinates or the right address, you're going to be going in the wrong direction and end up more
Yeah.
frustrated. And the
Yeah.
truth
And you
is
and I
that,
have talked about the fact that so many people are mistyped. Like I was mistyped for years when, I mean, you pinned me without even, like, I think within 5 seconds of me speaking.
yeah. Well, that's the beauty of me being me. And
Yeah.
and my commitment to understanding people without an assessment, because they are so
Hmm.
flawed. The assessments are inaccurate 65 to 70% of the time. So I knew that because I was mistyped as well. I was like, well, how good is this fucking tool if it's not accurate? Right. And
Yeah.
so I needed to really get skillful at understanding people. Now you might be saying, well, what do? I can't have access to you. I have an assessment that is over 95% accurate. So I'm just going to
Yeah.
say that because this conversation will probably really have you intrigued in understanding yourself. And I want you to have the right information. So I worked long and hard to find one that I could provide you to give you the right information. And once you have the right information, the possibilities are endless on how to
Yeah.
navigate all this stuff. So
Yeah.
once
And I'll make sure that's in the show notes too, because I actually shoot your link to almost every client that I work with because I want them to be correctly typed and then be able to utilize it.
oh, thank you for that.
Yeah, of course.
And it's the hard part about the Enneagram, but I love AI and I love like human design and astrology. I love anything that allows us to have awareness about ourselves. And also like it's hard to just rely on something that, asks us a few questions and poof, this is who you are. Now,
Hmm.
I believe like human design and astrology, like those are pretty on point tools, right? But the Enneagram really allows you to get into the psychology and spirituality and the motives behind everything we do and who we are, right? I think human design, astrology are amazing and telling you who you are, but then what the fuck do you do with that? Right?
Yeah.
What's the roadmap on how to authentically and strategically use this in my relationships, personal and professional, the relationship with myself? And so when I recognized that I was actually an Enneagram 8, not an Enneagram 3, right? Behaviorally, I can look very 3-like, right? I can see a goal, hit a goal. I can crush anything in its path. I can have tunnel vision so laser focused that nothing will stop me. And those are some of the main behaviors of an Enneagram 3. But what motivates a 3 is not even close to what motivates me. And especially high achieving women, I think, are the most mistyped on the Enneagram.
Yeah.
Once I understood that I was an 8 and what that meant for me, this allowed me to have, like I said, compassion and empathy and understanding for why there were certain times where no matter how much the carrot got dangled in front of me, I was like, yeah, that's a hard pass. And it was so frustrating to me because I judge myself and beat myself
Mm.
up. And because that felt weak, which is the biggest fear of an Enneagram 8, what I did to quiet that voice became very excessive and extreme and destructive in my life, to myself and to the things that I was here to do, to the people that I love. And so when I understood what was at the root of everything that motivated me, this allowed me to make better decisions, to understand where I would get tripped up in that journey, because behind every motive is a fear trying to protect the things we are most afraid of, right? There are these coping mechanisms and defense mechanisms. And depending on your conditioning and the experiences you've had in your life, your measuring stick might be a little skewed, right? So I'll use myself as an example, just so you guys can kind of hear the difference in the measuring stick being skewed. So as an Enneagram 8, I am motivated by being strong, and being independent and not being weak. Being weak or put in a vulnerable situation is the worst case scenario for an Enneagram 8. So depending on what was taught, told, and modeled for you, how you go about protecting that can get a little extreme, a little destructive, right? I grew up in an alcoholic home, right? Where I was modeled what was strong in my household. It was very dysfunctional. It was very skewed, but because it wasn't repaired, it got repeated by that person and also myself, right? So as I was learning about the Enneagram and recognizing that the way that I measure strength and independence might need some recalibrating. And it doesn't mean that I'm never going to be motivated by strength, because I always am. I always will. Everything that I do will, like, what does this mean for my strength? Now, what has changed is what I believe strength means today, and what true, honorable, authentic strength means today. I'm still spicy. I'm still intense. I'm still
Which is
like,
why I've loved you, like from the
yeah,
moment that I like heard you the first time. Like I was like, all
yeah,
right, she's cool. And I'm pretty sure you went up to like hard rock music as well. But
yeah.
I love what you just said about that, changing the definition of strength and not change, because I think there's some people that hear their Enneagram, and depending on their perception of the whatever it is that their motivator is, like there can be some shaming or some, oh, I don't want to be that type, versus leaning into it and realizing, okay, how does this work for me?
Yeah, I didn't love when I read the parts about like the fear of vulnerability, because as an 8, I think I'm bulletproof and that I can handle anything and I'm strong as fuck. And like there isn't a challenge that I face. And for the most part, that's true as long as I can flex. But because I'd been conditioned that vulnerability was a weakness, I resisted the very thing that would allow me to have connection and support and love and all the things that my heart always craved. But because I was so fearful of it, I not only resisted it, but sabotaged it and pushed it away. Now, with somebody like you, that's an Enneagram 7, you aren't motivated by being strong. You could care less about that. You're motivated by like freedom of choice
Yep.
and certainty that all options are available to you. And I'm raising a daughter that's wired like you. So you can imagine if I'm looking through the lenses of like, you got to be strong and everything is about strength, and I'm trying to empower and motivate her, she's looking at me like, Mom, you don't understand me.
Oh
And
yeah.
you,
My mom was a one.
God help you, you're her worst case scenario.
Yeah.
But you're actually the very thing that is her growth.
Hmm.
If she could humble herself enough, like, you're her biggest trigger. My son is my biggest trigger. My son is my growth number. You're an Enneagram one's growth number, but you're also the thing that makes her the most uncomfortable, I'm sure, at times.
Hmm.
My son was,
100%. To the
my son
point
was,
where, like, circling back to the whole, like, you like, for me, when I first found out or realized I was a 7, I kind of rebelled against it because I had been brought up that achievement was what the goal was, and to be strong and all these things that do kind of go against the motivators of the 7. So
totally.
yeah.
Yeah, the more that I understood the Enneagram 7 in my daughter, I realized that I thought she looked at life and had the same perspective from the same lenses I did. And recognizing that there are 8 other lenses that the world and people in your life, I guarantee, look through that are different than you. And it doesn't make any of us better than the other. Like, that was also
Mhm.
humbling. I thought like strength was like the holy grail. And although it serves its role and it is important and all of that, it isn't the only way and the only perspective. And quite honestly, like, every Enneagram type superpower is its superpower when it's in a place of love, compassion, empathy, service, and grace, fun, and innocence. But
Mhm.
when I'm operating in that superpower from a place of fear, insecurity, unworthiness, shame, guilt, and a whole fuck ton of ego, that
Mhm.
same superpower becomes the kryptonite, not only to myself,
Yeah.
but to anything in its path. And so recognizing the other 8 perspectives and superpowers, like, I'm only going to learn from them if I can see them and honor
Mhm.
who they are, including my 2 children, a 2 and a 7. And so those were the first 2 types that were outside of myself that I really dove deep into, because as a mom and as their number one leader in their life and mentor in their life, I've been a single mom for 15 years. And although, um, I was a very tactical mom and they never had to worry about a roof over our head, I would always make shit happen. Hello, flex,
Yeah.
strong, independent, right? Like, that's where it was a great thing. But I lacked nurturing and compassion and understanding, which as their mom, they so desperately craved and deserved and desired. And the first step in, first understanding not only how the 8 is motivated and how I fear, but also how others might receive me, and that I have a responsibility in that. And the old me would have been like, well, seriously, this is who the fuck I am. If you can't deal with it, there's something wrong with you.
Mhm.
And that's how we can use these tools in a very dysfunctional, out of integrity, abusive way, right? There's other
Yeah.
tools that have been used that way as well. So, a lot of times I'll be sharing about the Enneagram and people are like, gosh, I wish I had known this sooner. And I'm a firm believer that when the student is ready, the tool and the teacher appears. And there's a
Yes.
reason why this was not made available to me before. I would have absolutely used it to manipulate, right? But at the
Mhm.
place that I came to this in my life, my kids were 14 and 15 at the time. And, as a single parent, it was tough. And, I had been an entrepreneur, had to like shut down that business and go into a corporate job for a little bit, only 2.5 years. But I felt like I was falling apart for them and not, I was keeping on the stoic, strong face. And because the expectation is like, I am bulletproof, right?
Yeah.
I was doing them a disservice by not showing them all the feelings and all the processes. And so understanding who they are, what motivated each of them and what their biggest fear was, I recognized that I was sometimes their worst case scenario right in front of them. And so I had to recalibrate and kind of look through their lenses from time to time. It's like, do I want to be right or do I want to be effective in my life?
Yeah.
The reality is I want to be both, but I can't get to righteousness without compassion and without understanding of who I'm talking to. So I started using this without putting an assessment in front of them. Um, I understood very clearly who my kids were and what motivated them. And that's the cool part about this is if you get genuinely curious about people and you genuinely give a shit about how to be the most effective communicator for them, you will get better at this. And so I started speaking to my son as though he was a 2. I knew it right away. I landed because when people feel seen, heard, understood, and valued for who they are, guess what
Mhm.
happens? Trust and credibility. And I don't give a shit if you're their parent. Like, that's a privilege. It's not a right. And I grew up in a home that was a do as I say, not as I do, an authoritarian.
Mhm.
And there was no good feelings in that. I mean, I got a lot of good shit from my parents. Like, they did the best they could and they taught me a lot of good shit. But growing up in this, like, it is absolutely not okay to be who you are. You just
Yeah.
do as I say, not as I do. And I was starting to repeat that. And like, like, I didn't earn the credibility and trust of my own children just because I birthed them or just
Mhm.
because I was their mom. It came when I looked through their lenses from time to time and learned how to communicate, speaking to that and recognizing that their fears are their fears and it doesn't make them weak or insignificant or invalid, right?
Yeah.
And when I used this tool and spoke to those things, everything in my house changed overnight. Everything.
Well, it's like you lifted the veil on any expectations and assumptions you were unintentionally placing on them.
100%. Like my son, who is an Enneagram 2, motivated by being loved and appreciated, biggest fear is not feeling worthy. Right. And here I am being this bulletproof, stoic, strong as fuck mother, thinking I was doing well by him. And actually, what I was doing every single day was chipping away at his confidence because I wasn't motivated by love and appreciation. So kids will automatically assume it's their problem and there's
Yeah.
something wrong with them. And when I recognized like that, I was like, oh my God. And could also learn from him, like having compassion and empathy, I lack naturally. It's a stretch for me. Just like you being a free spirit and go with the flow is like for your mother, the hardest thing for her to do. It's
Yeah.
also she needs to grow the most. And so, of course, I was gifted and blessed with this beautiful son that not only was here to teach me the thing I needed the most, but also I could bring something to the table if and only if I saw, understood, appreciated, and valued him for who he is and who he's wired
Mm.
to be. And that changed everything for him. Like, not
Yeah.
only did he learn healthy boundaries, he wasn't looking for love and appreciation from a dysfunctional place. But he was able to have healthier boundaries and use the considerate helpers superpowers for superpowers instead of coming from this place of codependency or insecurity or unworthiness, shame, ego, guilt, whatever. And same thing with my daughter.
Yeah.
You can imagine like having me as a mother, although you like that intensity, and yes, sevens love intensity, they love the spicy parts. But where sevens don't love where I come from is the judgment or trying to make you do things that you don't want to do.
Mhm.
And I love to make sure that everybody around me is in control and strong. But for a 7, I'm speaking a different language when I'm all about that with her. It was like, let's find excitement in this. And there was nothing exciting about being in control sometimes for an Enneagram. They're about like
Yeah.
the experience and the choices that come from that. And she was the reason why I really dove into the Enneagram, because as a mom and as a woman who doesn't have a relationship with her mother, I don't today. And not because my mom's a bad person, because she's not, she's beautiful, but she didn't have the emotional capacity, willingness, awareness to be able to have that relationship with me at this point. And I didn't want that repeated. I wanted my daughter to not only just
Mhm.
love me, but also respect and admire me enough to tap into my wisdom, not because she was afraid of me, but
Yeah.
because I saw, respected, and honored who she was always designed to be. And like, she's my best friend today. She's almost 27 years old. And not only is she one of my best friends, she's also my greatest teacher and brings wisdom to the table that I would have judged as all over the place, unfocused, a little woo, a little unrealistic. But the gift of an Enneagram 7 is the ability to believe that anything is possible, anything. And there are no
Yeah.
restrictions to that. And I like to contain things. And yeah, she opened up and blew the lid off everything for me.
Yeah, I'm kind of giggling because those are like legitimately words that I've heard from my mother as far as like, oh, you're unrealistic. Oh, you're, anyways. So, but one of the things that I love that you kind of brought in here is because this applies, like, if anyone's listening and like, it's not just with being a parent, because I don't have kids, but utilizing this as how do you communicate with your partner? How do you communicate with your business associates? How do you communicate with your friends? And not only that, but then how alongside that, I've heard enough of your story to know, and anyone who goes through any major change and like learns them about themselves and then starts to bring that to the people in their lives, there are going to be people that aren't ready to come alongside you, and you're going to have to lose people. And so I want to talk through the grief that comes with like both having to let go of who you were prior
Yep.
and let go of the people who aren't ready to come with you, and how you navigate that and utilize the Enneagram in order, like, in that process.
It's really hard. It's really painful, and it's really possible. It's really possible. It doesn't mean that there aren't moments, I'm not happy that I don't have a relationship with my mom, but I also am not gonna throw myself to the wolves, so to speak. Not that she was ever,
Hmm.
terrible. Like she was kind, and she just
Yeah,
emotionally.
they can be a great person and not appropriate for your life right now, or
Yeah,
maybe appropriate is not the right word, but
right. When I had the realize, but what it did allow for me to do was let go of some resentments that I had. Right.
hmm.
First, not only for myself, but also the people in my life. When you recognize, yes, our parents, the people in our life have done the best they could, unless you're dealing with a fucking psycho, sociopath, mean, narcissistic, like, and those are absolutely, you know, out there, right? And tendencies are there even in the best of homes, right? Um, Sometimes consciously, sometimes subconsciously.
Hmm.
But when I had the realization that, like, okay, I love these people in my life, but I am not going to self-abandon one more day. I had
Yeah.
self-abandoning for 40 years. And although there was a lot of the conditioning that um, brought that on, we could easily say, well, it was because my dad was a raging alcoholic. You never knew what you're going to get. We could say that, well, mom was emotionally neglectful and quite honestly abandoned me emotionally. I could say that. And both those things are true. And I have a responsibility for what I'm going to do with that.
Yeah.
Right. Like, it doesn't mean that doesn't happen. And I have some work to do around grieving that was my experience. Absolutely. And there were some heinous things and abusive things that happened in my life growing up. All very true. And we have this moment in our life of deciding, is that going to define us, or are we going to use it to refine us? Right. And that means we have to learn how to let go of the resentment. It doesn't mean we sweep it under the rug and say it doesn't fucking bother me, because we're humans and things hurt.
Hmm.
And the grieving process requires us to feel, not just understand from the neck up. Like, this is the problem with even understanding some of this is, like, yeah, I can see, like, and understand why my dad was the way he was. I can see why my mom was the way they were. And that's understanding from the neck up. That's the first part. And that's the problem with personal development, because most of it is about mindset and reconditioning of the mindset. Very important. But if we don't feel and grieve everything from the neck down, we're gonna keep having to learn the lesson the hard way. It's gonna keep showing up, same package, different wrapping paper in every aspect
Yeah.
of our life. And so even though, like, I had understood why things went the way they went, I kept repeating certain kinds of relationships in my life, right? Women that would emotionally abandon me, men that would want me to be a chameleon to conform to whatever they wanted, which is the relationships I had with both of my parents. So my dad passed away right before I went into rehab, like 6 weeks before. So I didn't get to utilize this in that lifetime. But there's been a lot of healing even in his time gone here on earth.
Hmm.
Um, Letting go of the dysfunction in my life. Like I said, there are people who think I think I'm too good or I'm self-righteous, or I'm judgmental. I don't judge anybody in my life, but I'm also not going to co-sign any bullshit or self-abandon one more day.
Yeah.
I was the age of 4, the first time I remember self-abandoning. 4. And if you are somebody that doesn't have a lot of memories of childhood, this will help you get there, right? We don't go back there to stay there. We go back there to kind of see where things went sideways and where those superpowers started becoming the kryptonite.
Yeah.
And, as I've journeyed through this, I also know this to be true. And if you're listening right now, knowing that you have people in your life that maybe you have to have stronger boundaries around or let go or both, you're scared of that. You're scared of how alone that might feel. You're scared of the backlash you're going to get, all valid and all things you will absolutely probably face. But if you are somebody that desires more, you've got a vision board, you're saying you want all these things for your life, you have to make room for them.
Yeah.
You have to. And it doesn't mean anybody's bad or that they did anything wrong. But if you really want the things that you say that you want, you have to make room for them. And sometimes that means letting go of family or a dysfunctional relationship. It's not easy. It's not fun. And there is kind of this purgatory time. I used to be somebody who was like, all right, God, that's my higher power is God. But universe, whatever you believe in, like this is kind of where we start negotiating, right? It's like, I will do this if everything that we do is like a contingency or like we want a time clock on it. And 12 years ago, I was like, okay, I'll get sober, but I want my relationship to miraculously be better, or I'll do this thing, but I want to make more money if I do it. Like the minute we start,
It's like we want the guarantee.
We do,
which doesn't happen.
We want to know if we're going to sacrifice something that immediately the gap is going to be filled. And unfortunately, the more we try to white knuckle and have control of that, the less that's actually going to happen. We might think we've gotten that because, let's say, Mr. or Mrs. Wonderful show up and we're like, there it is. Or we start, I just manifested this, or it's a sign. And it's like, no, not always. Sometimes we're settling for shit because we're so uncomfortable in it. One of the things like that I had to let go of early on in this journey 12 years ago was a relationship that not surprising was just like the one I had with my dad. And it was highly toxic. Tons of chemistry, all the things that I had with my father too. Like my dad and I, like we had this weirdly chemistry filled, but dysfunctional relationship. And of course I was repeating that and I had to let go of that. Now, did I do it the most elegant way? No, of course. I couldn't just say, this isn't working for me. I blew up my fucking life is what I did in order to make that happen. But I remember, after I let go of that, and I'm somebody who is a relationship person, and for 7 years, I didn't date. That's a little excessive. But for 7 years, I didn't date, mainly because I really want to understand what my part was in all the breakdowns of every relationship I had ever been in, because it always takes two, right? Like, yeah, there was some shit that went on, but I wanted to understand where my part was. Thank God for the Enneagram, because I was like, oh, this makes a lot of sense. I like to flex. I like to all the things. And I remember my therapist saying, like, I want you to practice date. I want you to start like dabbling in that. And although like that might be good for some people, for me, I knew it wasn't. I was like, listen, and I had to check myself though, right? Because I was like, okay, is this me trying to be superhero strong and protect the vulnerability? Or is this me in discernment and knowing exactly? And I had to check myself a couple times, and that takes practice because we can bullshit ourselves.
I've definitely felt that, like when you first start any tool that you're diving into, any knowing yourself deeper, any of that stuff, it's that kind of back and forth of like, okay, am I falling back into an old pattern? Is this a blind spot that I'm just not quite checking myself on? Or is this actually growth? And I mean, it can be a very confusing back and forth for a while until you really nail it. It's the reps that you have to get, just like anything.
Just like anything. And, we can justify anything to protect our biggest fears, right?
Yes.
I was like constantly, it's why having a very solid coach, like somebody like me to kind of gently help you see your blind spots, we're always going to have them. right? It's just like
Mhm.
driving a car. I don't care if you're driving a Rolls Royce or a Kia. Like they both have a blind spot. It doesn't matter how nice the
Mhm.
car is. You got to check it. And I don't care how self-aware you are, you're going to have a blind spot. And until you are skilled and humbled enough to know that they're always going to be there and are okay with it, having somebody to guide you through that to help you discern, is this avoidance, numbing, justification, or is this discernment? And so
Mhm.
once I had discerned that this hiatus I was doing with relationships, this relationship anorexia that I was kind of in for a while, when she said to me, I want you to practice date, and I said, no. And I was like, ooh, that was quick. And checking myself, I was like, and I said, this is my truth. And yes, I'm afraid of being vulnerable, no doubt about it, but I'm also ready. I recognize that vulnerability is strength. I'm there. And that being said, I also don't want to be distracted by what isn't for me and miss the miracle that is coming.
Yeah.
And so I am okay in this season of silence and this season of loneliness too, so that I am so fully present with myself and feeling my own nervous system, my own energy, that I will know when this person shows up. And sure as
Mhm.
shit, that is exactly what happened with my relationship that I'm in with the person I'm going to go the distance with in this lifetime at this point. If I had been dabbling with what wasn't for me, when he showed up energetically, I would have missed it. I would
Mm.
have been blind to it, and I would have been distracted with nonsense,
Yeah.
right? So as we're kind of taking this inventory in our life and recognizing there are some people, places, and things we're going to have to surrender and let go of so that we can make room for what is coming and for all the things we say we deserve and desire, that comes with a season of silence and that sabbatical of purgatory of like, this sucks, this part is messy, and we're left with ourselves instead of all these things
Yeah.
used to distract or numb ourselves. But having the tool of the Enneagram, when that stuff comes up, instead of leaning into this dysfunctional parts of my personality and who I am, I could honor them and use it to grow and attract
Yeah.
the very thing that I wanted, even though it's hard, even though it's amazing.
Yes. There's so many like gold nuggets in what you just said. I mean, first and foremost, I 100% think the Enneagram is such a great tool to come alongside you and help you take radical responsibility
Mm-hmm.
where it's needed. And then you were talking about dating, but it could be applied to anything in life. Like we always want to kind of jump the gun and get to where we want to be, but it is so important to take that time because chances are if you do try to jump the gun, there's going to be a lot of lessons that you miss and you're going to take up that space that you need to have that white space that you need in order to allow the things that are meant for you down the road. Like I bet 12 years ago if you jumped into like where you are now with like the relationship, the business, all these things, like it wouldn't work. You wouldn't be able to hold it because you hadn't done the work leading up to it.
Not only that, we hear the work, right? What is the work,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I want you to think about, like, especially when we have this reckoning in our life, whether it's we're on this personal growth, personal development journey, we're diving in, we're going to the events, we're surrounding ourselves with people that are going to up level our lives, and maybe even hiring a coach. And then all you turn around and you're left with this big pile of wreckage that you feel like you've been buried under for so
Mm-hmm.
long. I don't care how good and skilled you are, you still have to take one brick and one rock off at a time. And
Yeah.
when we start this journey, we have to pull off the stuff that's on top first. It is the easier stuff. And this is where the personal development world also gets a little fucked up too, is like, if you just do these few things, you're solid, and then we find ourselves like, once we clear some of the path, then we're like, oh my God, there's this other layer, there's this other layer.
Mm-hmm.
And I just want you to know there's going to be layers till you're dead.
Yeah.
Okay. And new levels bring new devils and new beautiful ways that we can grow. Like, those devils are here to not just trigger us, but to be a catalyst for change,
Mm-hmm.
right? But we have to do it brick by brick. And a lot of us want to rush it, myself included. I had no idea the depths of the piles we're under. And if you're like me, like, if you have any time on this earth, I got 51 years on this earth. There's a lot of bricks that I have been buried under for a long, long time. And, you know, we do it one at a time, one at a time. And the more that you surrender to the process, the easier and the faster we can go through the layers. We can't bypass them. We can't just like try to get another stick of dynamite and blow it up again to hope they fly out a different way. It's just going to make it
Yep.
worse. But recognizing that as we grow, and like the things that I have awareness of and insight around, I couldn't have accessed 12 years ago because I had this outer layer of wreckage, the obvious stuff, at least obvious for then. Like now I'm like, oh my gosh, how did I not see that? Because I was piled
Yeah.
other rocks before that.
Yeah.
Right. And just know that you are on this journey until you're dead. When you brought up, you know, yes, we've talked about dating, we've talked about parenting, but also like the support and, you know, business support and friendship support we want in our life. Because although I love my children and I love my man partner in my life, like I have to have more than that in my life. We can't rely and put it all on one person, place, or thing to be our end all be all for support.
Yeah.
And, you know, having supportive friendships, business and personal, was something that I've always struggled with because I didn't want, you know, Enneagram 8, don't want to rely
Strong.
on anyone.
Yep.
Strong. I don't need anyone. And, you know, I've rushed into some decisions in those areas before because I just like, I didn't want to be vulnerable. And of course, when we're not vulnerable, we're going to attract something that isn't for us. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And that showed up in different people, places, and things. And I've had to kind of go through the reckoning in those relationships too until the last few years. But again, having this as the ultimate compass, along with my intuition, my nervous system, and my faith, really act as this power tool bunch to help me make those hard decisions, have hard conversations, take accountability, radical responsibility, and move forward so that I can have this beautiful support system around me here on earth and beyond. The friendships and the support that I have in my life is something that required me to be vulnerable, because anybody of quality in your life, although you might bring something to the table that they need, and they may bring something to the table that you need, if there isn't this beautiful vulnerability exchange, it's not going to last.
Yeah.
It's not going to be soulful either. It's just going to feel like we're checking boxes here.
Mm-hmm.
The older you get, the more you realize you don't want to just be checking boxes and getting to the end zone all the time. You want to find joy in the journey, and the joy is in the relationships that we make along the way, personally and professionally. And that requires this level of vulnerability from an authentic, healthy place. Kind of went off on a tangent there, but
no, I love it. I think that's such an important thing to bring up. And I mean, I've talked about it on the podcast in the past as well, as far as really being very intentional with who your inner circle is and who you develop a relationship with, and not just having a group of people that you call friends, but they're really more acquaintances, like having those deep, vulnerable relationships that are like symbiotic and you can give and take from each other, and having people for different things. So I think it was really great that you brought up the, like, yes, the partner, yes, the kids, but don't put everything on them. Have people I have different people that I go to for business stuff than I do for like more personal stuff. There are a few people that overlap, but like, it really is, there's different realms that they bring things to the table we can be vulnerable in.
And understanding as you grow, that circle might have to change. And I don't care how much time you've invested. I don't care how great of a human they are.
Yeah, people don't get to stay in my inner circle just because we've known each other since middle school. No. Like we could have met yesterday or years ago. Like that doesn't matter.
And you might be on the receiving end of somebody cycling you out of their inner circle.
100. Yep.
Been on that too. And that doesn't
it's okay. It feels like shit, but knowing that it's not. Yeah.
It does. I want you to know it's not just me saying, cut everybody out of your life. That doesn't, like, no, I've been on the receiving end in recent times of somebody recognizing that my part in their story was over and it wasn't on my terms. I did not like it. I did not it did not feel good. I had to grieve and feel and be
Yeah.
sad and understand that that is part of the journey. And like everything happens the way it's supposed to. I don't believe that everything happens for a reason, because there's some shit that goes down that really,
Yeah, I want to punch people when they say that, especially like I'm sure you had the same. People tend to
yeah.
say that after like a loved one dies, and I'm like, that not helpful.
No,
Like,
or like being sexually assaulted and abused,
yeah,
like hard to like say that that happened for a reason, but I do believe that
yeah,
everything that does happen can be used for something beautiful, even being on
100%.
the receiving end of being sometimes beautifully and elegantly moved out of the inner circle, and sometimes abruptly and
Hmm.
abusively. I've been abused being kicked out of a circle in
Yeah.
recent years, and that sucks. And like, as much as I wanted to annihilate those people for doing me dirty like that, I
Hmm.
also, because of my understanding of this, understand why it had to happen. And then my work in grieving that and feeling that, it would be easy to say, well, fuck them. I don't care about them. No, I did
Yeah.
care
And
about.
that's where I think that's such a good thing to bring up too. Is like, yes, it would be easy to say, oh, fuck them. And you could easily find people that would back you and kind of allow you to get away with that justification. At the same time, what's going to serve you best in that moment is utilizing Enneagram or whatever tools you have to kind of work through that grief that is inevitable and
And
work
people that won't
through.
co-sign you just saying, fuck it.
Yep.
Who cares? Like
Yeah.
lean into the people in my life that would be like, ooh, that had to hurt a lot. Let me
Hmm.
hold space with you while you
Yeah.
feel the sadness, which I don't love sadness. If you guys haven't seen the movie Inside Out, it's required homework for everyone I work with, because that movie had me in the fetal position in all the beautiful, healthy ways, because I recognize how much I was in love with one or two of those emotions, but the full five are required for us
Mm,
to get to transformation and acceptance.
yeah.
And I saw things like joy and sadness, which I resist. They're the emotions I resist the most, because those are vulnerable. If I'm too joyous, if I let myself get excited, that means I could be equally betrayed. If I
Yeah.
felt self feel sadness, then I'm just weak. But if you don't allow yourself the full scope of the human emotions, it's going to keep showing up in your life until you get the lesson. And usually that will come
Hmm.
like a 2x4 in your
Yeah.
face.
It's like it'll come as a whisper and then a louder whisper and then eventually a 2 by 4 and then like legitimately pushing you off a cliff if you still don't listen.
Yeah, which is where I was 12 years ago when all this
Hmm.
started. It was my resisting all the things and all the feelings and all the emotions, and holding beautiful, honoring space for them and recognizing they're all valuable, they're all important, and they're all necessary for me to actually transform my life.
Yeah.
And even though anger is the one I love the most, I was using it in a very dysfunctional way. Now I have healthy anger, and it's not used to like cut a bitch and end up as a Dateline episode here at some point, right? Now
Yeah.
it's that. And now like I welcome the sadness to come in. So when I was outed of a circle that, was abusive and not nice and horrible, quite honestly, of course, I wanted to pop off and hold resentment and be vengeful and angry. And there was a place for anger in that. It wasn't fair, it wasn't kind, it wasn't nice, but I'm not going to cut her,
Yeah.
right? And then I welcomed in the sadness of that really hurt. I
Hmm.
gave my all to that relationship. I gave my all to that person. And she's out here saying really horrible things about me, not just rejecting me and abandoning, but also saying really mean, untrue things about me. And that
Hmm.
is hurtful and that is sad. And when I
Yeah.
welcomed that in and leaned into the support that I have, they're like, gosh, that has to hurt. And even though they think I'm strong and they know I'm strong, the fact that I'm willing to bring in the sadness and let myself feel it, guess what happened? I moved through that grieving process pretty
Hmm.
damn fast. And guess what else happened? A better, bigger, more supportive, vulnerable community moved into the circle. And
Yeah.
and it is better, and I'm not as depleted. And even though, yes, I still have moments where it's still like the sting will come up from time to time when I
Hmm.
hear that person's name brought up in times like, yeah, it's gonna sting. And she's on her
Yeah. You're
journey.
human.
I'm human. We all
Yep.
are. You listening are. And so you have to let yourself feel all the human emotions and not just like fall in love with the one that protects your biggest fear from happening.
Yeah. I think that little bit too of like the you're human, like it still stings is a good reminder too. Cause I know when I was relative like enough into the healing journey that I could recognize when I allowed, like I almost took those like stings when it would come back as like a, oh, I'm not quote unquote there yet and I still need to work on things. And it took me a while
Absolutely.
to come to terms with like, okay, no, that's just me being human and it's okay. And I can
And
move
it's
forward. Like the fact
necessary.
that I'm not flipping out on someone shows the growth.
Yeah. Yeah. I've had friends of mine that are Enneagram eights like me. Like seriously, like we're the type of friend. Eights are the ones that you call if you need a body buried, right?
Yeah.
And seriously, we are the challenger for a reason. And some of the people that I've worked with who've also become friends, she's like, I am so happy that I'm an evolved eight because seriously, this person does not know what I could have done to them. But I also not only
Mm-hmm.
that, but like I feel more confident that feminine energy has a place where we can thrive and grow and we're not energetically bankrupt from popping off all the time. Like not only does it help us transform and heal and grow, but we need both that feminine and masculine energy, and we need to like know when it's time to like step on the gas over here or pull back over there.
Yeah.
And understanding your Enneagram type will allow you to leverage that in the most beautiful, elegant, healthy ways so that you can transform, grow, make a lot of money, have amazing sex, have the
Yeah.
most beautiful relationships in your life, be the mom or dad you want to be. Like it's a holistic approach to your whole life. And when you
Yeah.
recognize that, like you don't have to wear all these different hats and you don't have to compartmentalize yourself. You actually can be who you were meant to be. You may wear the hat a little bit different for this situation or, twist it this way, but it's still the same hat. I'm still the same person, whether I am talking to the CEO at John Deere or I'm on the floor with a 5-year-old. I'm still the same
Hmm.
person, but how my hat gets worn just changes. And when
Yeah.
when you are operating like that, you will have boundless amounts of energy. You will reverse the aging process. You will have better relationships in your life, and you won't feel like you're dying at the end of a day. Like how
Hmm.
great is that?
Yeah. I love that. Ah, Tracy, thank you so much. And I'm definitely going to put the links for your blueprint and just like the ways to work with you in the show notes here. I mentioned this earlier. I've worked one-on-one with Tracy and it honestly blew me away. Like, Tracy, I don't think I even told you this. I might have in our session. I can't remember. But I was like, okay, cool. Like Enneagram coaching, I really want to dive in. I want to know myself. And then we got to the part where you're like, okay, cool, let's dive into business stuff. And I was like, wait, what? I get more than just this.
Yeah.
So you are such a light and it's just amazing how you're able to really dive in and see things with like through the lens of the Enneagram, but it's so much more than that. And then we didn't even get into like tri types and all these other things that
Oh,
I like, no matter how much I dove into the Enneagram, like you don't find that on like a Google search of what an Enneagram test is. So y'all definitely go check it out. At minimum, go get her blueprint. All right. Like you'll thank me later. So
yeah.
Tracy,
One
thank you
thing.
so much for having you for coming on.
Yeah, it's one thing to have the roadmap, but like knowing where to go with it, it's
Yeah.
sometimes having somebody talk you through it. You'll have to have me back on and we can dive deeper into some
Yeah.
of it as like people are like, yes, like I am here for
Yeah. The
this,
tri type blew me away in of itself.
right? Yeah. It's amazing. And sometimes you just need the first nugget to open the door, just like I did 12 years ago. Like I only knew like the eight and that I was an eight when I first started and unpacking what that meant. And obviously what I've been able to do and use it as a compass to guide me in all areas of my life the last 12 years has allowed me to do what I do today. So thanks for
Yeah.
having me on and letting me pour into your people. It means a lot.
Yeah. All right. Check y'all next time.